In this clan, boys are worthless. Girls tame the beasts, inherit the power, and rule the family. Too bad for them, because the moment I was reborn, I found a secret realm where monster eggs hatch in a single day. The midwife's face twisted with disgust the second she pulled me from my mother's womb. A boy, she spat, as if announcing a curse. My mother, the great matriarch's fourth daughter, wept not from joy, but from shame. In the Azure Fawn clan, I wasn't a blessing. I was a breeding tool waiting to mature, a political bargaining chip, a mouth to feed until some powerful family wanted my bloodline for their daughters. But as I took my first breath in this new world, something awakened inside me. A door opened in my mind, and behind it lay an impossible realm of swirling mist and warm golden light, where time itself bent to my will. They thought they'd received a worthless son. They had no idea they'd just birthed their greatest weapon. The cold at me first, not the gentle warmth of blankets or the comfort of a mother's embrace. No, the air of Mist Peak Valley cut through my newborn skin like a blade. My lungs burned as they filled for the first time, and the scream that tore from my throat wasn't the cry of an infant experiencing existence. It was the howl of a grown man trapped in flesh that couldn't obey his commands. I remember dying. The details blur at the edges now, fading like morning mist under harsh sunlight. But I remember the sensation of falling, of letting go, of accepting that everything I'd built and everyone I'd loved would continue without me. And then nothing. Peaceful, infinite nothing. Until this. My eyes refused to focus properly. The world swam in watercolors of gray stone and flickering candlelight, shapes moving at the periphery that my adult mind struggled to interpret through infant senses. But my ears worked perfectly fine. Another boy. The voice belonged to someone older, authoritative. Footsteps approached, heavy with the weight of judgment. The fourth daughter's womb produces nothing but disappointment. Matriarch Seraphina. The midwife's tone shifted instantly, coating itself in honeyed deference. I've already sent word to the outer peak. The Bloodkeeper quarters have been prepared. Bloodkeeper. The word meant nothing to me in that moment. But the way these women spoke it, like they were discussing where to store grain rather than where to raise a child, told me everything I needed to know about its implications. A new face swam into my limited vision. Silver hair, cascading like frozen waterfalls. Eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall, now examining me with all the warmth of a merchant appraising damaged goods. This was Seraphina, I understood. The matriarch, the woman who ruled this clan with absolute authority. My grandmother. Acceptable bloodline markers, she said flatly. The hair will lighten to proper silver within months. Eyes show the violet undertone. He'll fetch a reasonable price when he matures. Price. They were already calculating my worth in whatever currency this world traded. My mother sobbed somewhere beyond my field of vision, and I realized with cold clarity that her tears weren't for me. They were for herself, for the shame of producing a son instead of a daughter who could carry on the family's power. In that moment, something hardened in my chest. Not hatred, not yet, but a quiet resolve that settled into my bones like iron finding its mold. I would survive this place. I would understand it. And then, the matriarch turned away without another word, her robes whispering against stone. As she departed, the midwife bundled me roughly, her hands efficient, but devoid of tenderness, and carried me through corridors that my swimming eyes could barely process. Days blurred together. After that, perhaps weeks. Time moves strangely for an adult consciousness trapped in a body that sleeps 18 hours and can barely lift its own head. But slowly, agonizingly, I began to piece together the world I'd been reborn into. The Azure Fawn clan compound sprawled across 3 mountain peaks connected by covered bridges and carved stone walkways. I learned this from a nursery window where my attendant, a silent woman who fed me with mechanical precision and changed my linens without ever meeting my eyes, would sometimes leave me propped against cushions, while she attended to other duties. Outer Peak, where I would eventually be housed. Middle Peak, where the common tamers trained their contracted beasts. An inner peak, rising above everything else like a crown of stone and jade, where the matriarch's bloodline resided in luxury, I could only imagine from this distance. But it was the courtyard below that captured my attention most completely. Beasts, creatures that defied every law of biology I remembered from my previous life, moved through that space with casual grace. A leopard made of living lightning prowled past a pond where serpents with crystalline scales basked in weak sunlight. Birds with feathers that shifted through every color of sunset perched on branches that seemed to bend toward them in reverence. And tending to all of them, moving between the creatures with practiced ease, was an old man. He walked hunched, this servant, his body bent by decades of labor that had carved permanent curves into his spine. But his hands moved with surprising gentleness as he filled feeding troughs and checked water levels. The beasts didn't shy from him, I noticed. They watched him with something that might have been tolerance, or perhaps even respect. A male, working among creatures that supposedly only females could command. I filed that observation away in my mind, adding it to the growing collection of information I was gathering about this clan and its contradictions. Night fell on what I estimated to be my 7th day in this new existence. My attendant had left hours ago. The compound had grown quiet, and I lay alone in my crib, staring at a ceiling I could finally see with reasonable clarity. My body demanded sleep. Every fiber of infant flesh screamed for rest, for the oblivion that would let it continue the exhausting work of growth. But my mind remained stubbornly, painfully awake. So I did what I'd done in my previous life when sleep refused to come. I closed my eyes, I steadied my breathing, and I reached for that place of inner stillness that had once been my refuge from a world that moved too fast and demanded too much. The meditation came easier than expected. Perhaps this body remembered something my mind didn't, some ancestral technique passed down through bloodlines that had nothing to do with conscious memory. Or perhaps the world inverted. One moment I was lying in a crib, small and helpless. The next, I was falling through darkness, so complete it had texture, weight, presence. My consciousness screamed in a voice that had no lungs to power it. And then, stillness. I stood upright, not my infant body, but a projection of self, a form that felt adult and whole in mine. Around me stretched an infinite void, black, as the space between stars, silent, as a hell breath. And then, responding to something I hadn't consciously done, a single mote of light ignited in the darkness. It hung there, pulsing gently, and the void itself seemed to lean toward it with hungry anticipation. The space hummed, with potential so thick I could taste it on a tongue I didn't actually possess. It welcomed me. This impossible realm inside my own soul welcomed me like a traveler finally returning home. I reached out with fingers made of thought, and the light reached back. This body may be considered worthless by every standard the Azure Fawn clan measured. But standing here, in this secret place that no one else could see or touch or even imagine, I understood with crystalline certainty that I carried something that could shake the very foundations of everything the matriarchy believed. They had birthed their greatest weapon, and they would never see it coming. The morning light filtered through rice paper screens, casting pale shadows across the nursery floor. I lay in my crib, 3 months old now, watching dust motes drift through golden beams, while my infant body refused to obey even the simplest commands. Roll over. Nothing. Lift your arm. A twitch, maybe. The frustration of inhabiting a vessel so utterly helpless would have driven me mad, if not for the nights. Every night, when the compound fell silent and the guards changed shifts, I slipped into meditation and visited my secret realm. The void had not changed since my first discovery, but I had learned its edges, its boundaries, the way it hummed when I pressed against its limits. 100 meters in diameter. No more, no less. The darkness was absolute except for that single mode of light still hovering at the center, patient, as a star waiting to be born. Footsteps outside my door. Light, quick, belonging to someone young. The screen slid open. A girl stood in the doorway, no older than 6, with midnight black hair pulled into warrior braids far too severe for her round face. Azure eyes studied me with an expression I recognized immediately. Contempt mixed with morbid curiosity, like a child examining a particularly ugly insect. "So you're the one," she said. Her voice carried the practiced superiority of someone who had already learned exactly where she stood in the clan hierarchy. The shame. "Ich blinkse her." It was the only response my body could manage. She stepped closer, peering over the edge of my crib with her nose wrinkled. "Mother says you're the reason Aunt May has to work in the kitchens now." She produced only a male. The girl spoke the words like they were an exotic curse, something she had heard adults say and repeated without fully understanding the cruelty embedded in the syllables. "Asura, my half-sister, daughter of the matriarch's second wife." Even at 6, she already had the bearing of someone destined for greatness. "You don't look defective," she continued, tilting her head. "Just ordinary. Worthless ordinary." She reached down and flicked my nose with one finger. "My storm leopard cub is smarter than you. At least she can walk." Then she was gone, the screen sliding shut behind her, leaving me alone with the echo of her words. The clan's shame. I filed the interaction away and returned to my observations. From my window, carried there by whichever servant drew the short straw for baby duty, I could watch the training grounds on Middle Peak. Female tamers moved through forms I didn't recognize, their contracted beasts flowing around them like extensions of their own bodies. A woman no older than 20 commanded a serpent made of living jade, its scales catching sunlight, as it coiled and struck invisible targets. Another rode a beast that looked like a tiger crossed with a thundercloud, electricity crackling between its stripes. The glowing sigils on their bodies told stories of power. The more contracts visible, the higher the status. Simple arithmetic of worth. I watched for hours, memorizing their movements, their techniques, the way they channeled something through those sigils.